From London, this is the Standard Podcast, and I'm Mark Blunden. Coming up in this episode, how scientists are turning Earth's pond life into powerful space lasers. But first, Cabinet Minister Bridget Phillipson stressed Britain was giving full backing to Ukraine amid a report that it will join America in allowing Kyiv to fire West-supplied long-range missiles into Russia. Outgoing US President Joe Biden's decision could see long-range missiles used initially in the Kursk region of Russia, where Ukrainian troops seized a swathe of territory in a surprise attack in the summer. This all comes ahead of Donald Trump taking office in January. So what do we know about the position of the US allies, the UK and France for their versions of the American ATACMS weapons, which are known as the Storm Shadow and Scalp missile systems respectively, and each costs a reported $1 million apiece per firing. We're joined from Parliament by the London Standard's political editor, Nicholas Cecil. Nick, what are you reporting on Monday?
What we're hearing overnight from America is that Joe Biden has given permission to Ukraine to fire long-range missiles supplied by America into Russia, basically to step up the pressure on Vladimir Putin's forces. The British have a long-range missile called the Storm Shadow, and the UK has always been at the forefront at pushing for heavier and better weapons to be supplied to Kyiv. The government isn't confirming anything on Storm Shadow, and likewise the French not confirming anything about their version, which is the Scalp long-range missile. But the expectation is that Britain will follow America in allowing Ukraine to fire these long-range missiles into Russia.
Remind us, what's been the build-up to this deal?
This has been going on for months and months now. So the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, has been asking time and time again to be allowed to fire these weapons supplied by the West, these long-range missiles, deep into Russia. One of the reasons is that Russia is using air bases from where planes are taking off to launch so-called glide bombs, which are having a devastating impact on Ukrainian towns and cities. So the Ukrainians want to attack these air bases, but they need permission to use these long-range missiles. Washington has been split on this issue. Some people felt that actually, yes, Kyiv should be given this consent to fire these long-range missiles supplied by the West, but other people in Washington were very concerned that it would escalate the conflict too much. Now, with Joe Biden on his way out after the Democrats lost the election, and with Donald Trump coming in as president, that seems to have changed the calculations, given that Russia is also stepping up its military action. Now, Washington wants to give Ukraine more firepower. Britain and France have been more up to giving this permission to Ukraine to fire these long-range missiles into Russia, but without Washington agreeing to it as well. They didn't want to go it alone, and also a lot of these long-range missiles rely on US navigation systems to be fired.
What's the political significance of this move?
I think what we need to look at here is the broader context, and particularly the US election. So Donald Trump has won the US election. He claims he's going to end the Ukraine war on day one. And so what Russia is doing at the moment, it's stepping up its military action because it wants to have as much territory in its hands, Ukrainian territory in its hands, if there is going to be a peace deal. So what we have here in response is the Biden administration saying, well, actually, we're going to help Ukraine even more. So it looks like there's going to be an escalation in this conflict ahead of a possible peace deal.
What's the battlefield importance of these weapons for Kyiv?
Certainly at the moment, the briefing suggests that America will allow these weapons to be used to help the Ukrainian forces in the Kursk region of Russia. Now, this is in the summer. There is a surprise attack by Ukrainian forces, and they seized an area of Russia, several hundred square kilometers. They've lost a significant amount of that land since they made this attack in the summer, but they're still holding onto a sizable chunk of Russia, or certainly at least one region of Russia. And if the Ukrainians can hold that land until any possible peace talks start, then that will be a negotiating power that they will have. They'll be able to say that, yes, we'll give you your land back as part of any peace deal.
Where does this leave things once the Trump administration comes into power next year?
The Trump administration will be able to pull the plug on this very swiftly after coming into power. Obviously, the Biden administration can give as many weapons as they can before they leave office in January. But certainly, there's a feeling that things are building up now in Ukraine, that we're going to see an escalation of this conflict, again, with these North Korean troops coming in to help Putin's forces. But what also that tells us is that if Russia is having to rely on North Korean troops, that the Russian army itself has got manpower problems. So we know that the Ukrainian forces have manpower shortages, given the appalling and shocking level of casualties. But the fact that the Russians are having to rely on even a smaller number of North Korean troops highlights that actually Vladimir Putin is also having problems in getting enough soldiers to the front line.
What's been the Kremlin's response?
The Kremlin is saying this is pouring fuel on the fire of the conflict. They've issued some very stern warnings about what would happen if America did take this action. Now, I think the world is waiting to see what Russia actually does do. I suspect that given that the Trump administration will be in place within a couple of months, I suspect that Putin will probably wait until Trump is in power to see whether he can get a deal which allows him to claim victory in Ukraine.
Let's go to the ads. Coming up in part 2, how scientists are turning Earth's pond life into powerful space lasers. Could they be used on future Mars missions? Why not hit follow on this podcast in the meantime and give us a rating. Welcome back. Now, could bacteria more usually found in British ponds help convert sunlight into laser beams to send power across space? Because scientists are creating an eco-friendly technology that harnesses the power of bacteria, which it's suggested could even sustainably power future Mars missions, cutting out more metals in favour of bioorganisms. The Standard Podcast spoke with Erik Gauger, Professor in Quantum Theory at Edinburgh's Heriot-Watt University's Institute of Photonics and Quantum Sciences, who explains how they hope to harvest solar energy organically.
We want to convert ambient sunlight into a focused laser beam. And how will that work? Solar pumped lasers have existed for a long time. They were realized not long after the invention of the laser, but usually they involve big concentrators, big lenses, kind of big optical elements, which are heavy and cumbersome. So what we're trying to do, what's different with our technology is we're hoping to piggyback on natural antenna structures which exist in photosynthetic bacteria. Some of these bacteria live in extreme conditions where there isn't very much light, and they've developed an amazing apparatus for capturing the little light that's there and funneling its energy to where it needs to go, in their case to produce chemical energy or chemical food. But what we'd like to do is we'd like to piggyback on that and use it to power our laser. And essentially these photosynthetic antennae take their lenses, but at the nanoscale. So they replace the big, heavy, bulky stuff with something which is just a few nanometers big and has been designed by evolution to do just what we needed to do.
How is the light harnessed?
We get photosynthesis everywhere, and you could say it ultimately powers almost all life on Earth. But the ones we're interested in, they live in bacteria, and there's two types we're targeting. One is green sulfur bacteria. They live very deep in the water, and they're very good at thriving in very low light conditions. So within these bacteria, they're large molecular structures which produce the food for the bacteria and the energy for the bacteria from the little light in their environment. So what we're looking to do is to extract these natural molecular structures and repurpose them. Another bacterium we're interested in is what's known as the purple bacterium. You find that in all sorts of ponds and waterways, they're not exotic at all, and they have beautiful power plants inside. It's kind of molecular ring-like arrangements of molecules which can again absorb light and funnel the energy to the reaction center where it gets converted into something that's more permanent. So we're looking specifically at the green sulfur and the purple bacterial light harvesting complexes.
What's the early stage testing you're doing here on Earth and your next steps for space?
At the moment, we're doing experiments on Earth. These structures have been studied for quite a long time, and with a particular focus recently because they appear to be using quantum mechanical effects, or there's a suggestion that quantum mechanical effects might play a role in making them as efficient as they are. So there's a lot of expertise in growing these bacteria, extracting the relevant complexes. Ultimately, the idea is, yes, to grow them on space. And as part of our research project in the consortium, we've got Professor Gisela Detrell from the Technical University in Munich, and her research area is human space technology. She's an expert on growing plants and bacteria on the ISS and in space. So ultimately, down the line, the plan is to actually grow the structures and produce that in a space environment. At the moment, we're doing it in our laboratories.
Could you expand a bit on the concept behind this organic power conversion process?
The concept is we passivate or deactivate the natural reaction centers where the energy that comes in with the light gets converted into an electronic excitation, and the reaction center does the chemistry. So that's how all photosynthesis works. You get energy from the light, it gets transferred to the reaction center as electronic excitation and then converted into chemical products, which have a long lifetime and can be distributed. So what we want to do, we want to passivate these reaction centers, and my chemistry colleagues know how to do that. So you can stop the chemistry from happening, but you still get the energy concentrated to the site of the reaction center. And that's where we put our lasing material, what's in technical terms known as a gain medium. That's where we put the material which actually produces the laser beam. So there's a bit of chemistry involved in functionalizing or kind of modifying the natural systems. We want to use most of what they do and then stop them taking the final step and come in with our lasing gain medium, which instead produces a laser beam for us.
And what do you foresee as future use cases?
The primary use case might be power generation and transmission. So the way it works at the moment, you have photovoltaic panels. You can charge a battery. You could then drive a laser electrically and send that power elsewhere. You've got the battery and the electronic components as a middleman. So we're trying to cut that out, directly upgrade, dilute sunlight into a focused high-energy laser beam, which can be used to transmit power from satellite to satellite, possibly even from space to Earth. So it's a way of wirelessly transmitting power over large distances. Lasers in space are also used for communication and even propulsion. So there's different things you can do with laser light.
And that's The Standard. For the latest news, head over to standard.co.uk. This podcast is back tomorrow at 4 p.m.